how to use a hem stitch, tying off, braiding, or plying a discontinuous warp to keep the weaving within its body and to allow for fringe or a clean finished edge. This is part 1 of a video that's all about finishing. Part 1 will just address what to do when you come to the end of a weaving with a discontinuous warp. In part 2, we'll pop the weaving off. So you'll see a weaving discontinuous warp come off this loom. You'll see the continuous warp on this edge come off the loom, and we'll address what to do with all of these edges that happen when you color change. And that'll be in the second half. So the first half is going to start with this thing called a hem stitch. This is a really nice edging strategy where you can lay in a pick of this stitch that can be pretty invisible or visible depending on the relationship of the weft material that you're using for the body of the cloth on that last pick versus what you bring in to do that stitch. Now, traditionally, what you would do is you would leave yourself, whatever your last weft pick is, you would leave yourself 3 times the length of that, and you would use this to make the stitch. You would feed it through a needle and use it to make the hem stitch across. We're going to fudge that just a little so that you can really see what's happening. Pretend that I'm continuing with this blue line, but we're actually going to replace it with this red so that you can see the color contrast and really see what the stitch is doing. But like I said, if we were to do it in this blue, and certainly if we weren't using such an exaggerated weight of material, a finer warp, a finer weft, this would be so invisible. The benefit of it is that it's a strong edging. It makes your piece able to be laundered, possibly, and also you then don't have to do anything to this warp. You can let it hang. So it's a great way to kind of reveal the warp through a fringe or some sort of continued hanging of that material. The stitch is both easy and I find it actually pretty difficult. I have to orient myself every time I'm about to do this by looking at some sort of photo instructional in parts. So I'm including in the PowerPoint lots of pictures of this. Learning stitches, sometimes it's nice to just have 3 images of it to remind you of the gesture. Here it goes. When you do a hem stitch, you work your warp in bunches. You pick up 3 warp ends at a time or 4 warp ends at a time, depending on the density of the cloth and how invisible you want it. You must pick up at least 2. We're gonna do 3 at a time. So if I were using this blue, I would just thread it through a needle and go ahead and bring it up under these warp ends, but I'm doing it with the red. So you start by turning your weft, picking up 3 warp ends, I'm gonna leave the red tail hanging, but imagine that it's taut. So if the blue material was what was coming around to make this stitch, you want to make sure it follows your selvages here. So not too loopy and also not too tight. You bring it under, and then here's the stitch. You bring it back over, and you bring your needle out from the back of the textile in the same opening as it's coming out here, but 2 warp ends up. So I counted 2 warp ends up. I'm going to go ahead and make that opening. It's still within this track, you can see, but I come out here under the weaving. I go around, essentially coiling. Then I go in the back and come out here. So those of you that embroider and are familiar with the thing called the blanket stitch, this might start to look a little familiar. It's also a stitch that digs a tooth into a ground to maintain an edge. Okay, and I go ahead, I'm using a doubled line, so I go ahead and I just tug on that. And you can see it compresses these and makes that bundle. Now you're here. So you want to do that stitch over and over and over again. That was the first one. So even when your yarn is coming out 2 picks up, you just go right back in, pick up your next 3, go under the bundle, then go around the bundle, and then come up 2 warp ends, but on the same track, okay? And that's our second bundle that we made. So you can see it does separate these, kind of bunches them together, and that might be a really desirable look. Again, go under your warp ends, go back over the warp end, and then come out 2 picks above. And I know this is meant to be just a practical, invisible stitch, but I love the way it looks with a contrasting color. And sometimes it's nice to show how everything is being held together if that's important to your concept. Okay, so you see I'm kind of like touching this and moving it every time I make a wrap. It's just to really maintain the tension, especially with the doubled up line. Make sure there's no bulkiness, nothing is accidentally loose here in the back. I'll just do maybe just 2 more. Okay, so again, I'm coming out here, I'm going around my bundle of 3, under it, making sure I tension, then I go over it, and then I come out 2 picks ahead. And that's a hem stitch. So after doing that across the entire plane, you'll be able to pop these off, and this body will be secured with that stitch. 1 more, go under, go over, come out 2 picks up that same line. Okay, so that's one of the ways of securing an edge of a weaving. When you're done, I just dip mine back through that last stitch, and then I'll show you how to stitch it into the back of the weaving when you're done. But before we do that, I want to show you a few other ways to secure these warp ends. One of the more common ways to secure warp ends is to just tie them in knots, to take 2 at a time. We'll work with these 2. Cut them, and so long as they are on opposite ends of that last pass, one going under, one going over, you can tie them in an overhand knot twice and just leave it. And a lot of times people will do this with sample weavings, things that are kind of low stakes, things that won't really need to be laundered, things that don't have to have a very pristine edge, because it's quick. So that's something to consider too. Do you want that narrative in your work? do you want that idea of the quick bind off in your work? I kind of love this way. It a little bit irks my compulsion to face things and make them uniform. These double overhand knots are kind of like funny, and they fray a little at the end of the lines. So they do add just like a different personality to the bottom of a weaving. Hem stitch, tying off. Another thing you can do, we'll just cut a few more of these and have them available. And you see that I'm like leaving the warp on the loom, and I'm only cutting when I'm ready to work those warp ends. It's just a way of stabilizing the cloth and not kind of shocking it by releasing all its tension at once. Another way that you can bind off is braiding. You can take, at the very least, 3 ends and do a simple braid. I'm including several images of braiding in our PowerPoint. So this is not necessarily a clear, easy, accessible demo of how to make a 3-strand braid. This is more to show you that I'm just very simply braiding this up, and that it is enough. It provides between those 3 warp ends enough tension and security against the weft that that's gonna stay in place. So if you're interested in braiding, I'm happy to give you a one-on-one quick demo on it, or you can use pictorial images included in the PowerPoint, and you'll see as a weaver, as you're looking at weavings finished with braiding, sometimes they're 3 strands, sometimes they're really simple. This one's kind of horrible and sloppy, but sometimes weavers go to great lengths, joke, to create super complex 8-strand plaited, flat, beautifully complex braids that continue to showcase the line of the warp. And then the last way I'll show you to finish, so see how our braid really does a great job holding that? The last way I'm going to show you to finish is this way called plying. For those of you that spin yarn, this will be really familiar. Now you can do this with 2 separate ends, but for demo's sake, I'm going to do it with 4. And this is essentially rope making 101, but you make the rope from the edge of your weaving. So to make rope, first you spin the string, you twist it into one direction. So you always have 2 ends, and you twist both ends in the same direction. I'm twisting like this. So from right to left, I'm twisting, okay? And you can see that twist build up in those strings. And then I'll twist this in the same direction. You can see that twist build up. And this is a rather sad but kind of romantic thing about rope. Because you're twisting these separate individual lines in the same direction, when you put them together and tie them at the end, which I'll do real quick, you want to keep tension on them and tie them while they're independent. And what'll happen is their desire to spin away from each other actually plies them together into a spun cord. So it's a very different look from a braid, if you can see here. One is spun and one is braided. But a similar sort of effect for securing the weft material in is that because the tension twists it up to this point, this weft cannot escape now. And those are some pretty simple, very basic ways to finish the edge of a textile. Now I'm gonna turn off this demo and we'll pick it up with part 2. We will pop the weaving off and we will start to tie ends in.